we for the past week, for the past month, I don't have any concept of time, evidently. For the past month, we've been looking at the idea of headwinds and hang-ups. Well, what the heck is that? Well, headwind is something that you're going forward, and it's just the wind's blowing right in your face, and it's making it harder to move forward. Hang-up is like you're trying to get somewhere, and everything keeps getting in your way and holding you up and making where you don't get where you're going. That's the idea here. And so we're looking at headwinds and hang-ups as they apply to our life, our Christian growth. We all have things that hold us back from continuing to grow as a Christian. Maybe we looked at this the first week. Maybe you think you are real good. Maybe you can't see past your own goodness. The second week we looked at maybe you are in a rut of complaining and need to learn how to trust God and move forward. We looked at how Israel was really in a place where it was either moving forward or that was it. I mean, it really wasn't. God gives us second chances, but eventually there comes a point when we have to make that choice of obedience or not. And then last week we looked at the idea of maybe you need to choose contentment and learn your own hang-ups and how to deal with them. A lot of times we go through life, not real happy, and we kind of try to put that on everybody else. So tonight we're going to look at something I think it's probably the most important of all 4 weeks. I was reading a book by Sam Chand, and he was telling the story about a board meeting that they were in. I'm sorry, it was not a board meeting. It was like a staff meeting. It doesn't really matter. The difference is so small. Anyways, and they were just in this meeting, and it got a little bit tense. There were some different people who thought that the company should go in a couple different directions. But as soon as the disagreement even started to surface, they said, "Okay, we're gonna call a break and resume this meeting, in a day or two." And the guy sitting next to Dr. Chan says, "Oh, I'm sure glad that they called a pause to this meeting. It was just really getting tense." And Sam said, "Is our purpose here to make a decision, or is it to avoid tension?" See, they were calling a break to the meeting because it got a little tense. But the truth was, it didn't really matter if it got tense or not, because their purpose in that meeting was not to avoid tension. It was to make a decision. And later in the same book, he mentioned that at a different time, I believe he was the president of a college at this time. He had weekly board meetings, and 2 of the board members just kept fighting on and on. There was always tension between them. They couldn't get along. They couldn't say anything civil towards each other. They always had something nasty to say behind each other's back, and it just got to be it was a constant conflict. And they tried dancing around it. They tried ignoring it. Finally, in one of the board meetings, he stopped and he said, "Okay, what's going on here?" And there's kind of this awkward silence. He's like, "I feel like this is ruining our productivity, and you two need to work out your problem." And then he said, "Well, how do you guys feel?" Like, talking to the other board members who weren't part of the conflict, and like, "Yeah, it's a little tense." And so he said, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to get up and leave, and you two are going to figure this out. And if you can't figure it out, we'll be making some serious changes. I'll expect a full update by next week's meeting." So he got up and he left, and his other board members left with him. He left his office, and those 2 bickering board members had to sit there and figure out their problem. So then the next board meeting, he started, as soon as it started, he said, "Okay, so what happened?" And the 2 board members said, "Well, we talked about it, and we figured out, they worked through the problem out with each other, and then they met a couple times throughout the week to just iron out the rest of it. And it got to be where the board as a total really started to work well together. And the 2 once enemies learned how to really work well and came up with some really good ideas. And it was the start of a new time at that college, because he was able to get really good ideas. They were able to work more beneficial together. And but it was a very tense meeting. That was a very tense time to be Dr. Sam Chand. So what is tension? Well, we all know that there are some issues in life that are tense. But it's a lot harder to actually define what warrants something being tense. Sometimes it can be conflicts with people, but not always. Just because you're in conflict with someone, you might not feel any tension about it. You might just feel like, "Oh, okay, I need to deal with this." And it might not bother you at all. It might be a problem that you're dealing with and dealing with and dealing with and dealing with over and over and again. The unresolvable conflict your problem that you're in the middle of. Some people don't mind waking up and dealing with the same problem every single day. I don't know. Maybe that's not you. For some people, it's just a stressful situation. Maybe you have to go to your family's house for the holidays, and it's just real tense. It's a stressful situation. We don't really have to know how to define tension. We know what it is. It's something that we feel very deep in us. This is tense. Well, but if there's anything about tension that we all know, it's that we all hate tension. It's not one of those things that we think, yes, I would like to have a tense day today. Today when I go to work, I hope we have a really tense meeting with the boss. I really hope that there's like that awkward silence. I love that awkward silence. It's just the best. We all hate tension. Have you ever worked with two people who weren't getting along? And you're like, okay, I'm going to go work over there. And somehow they keep trying to pull you into it. Man, what's his face? He's such an idiot. And it's like, I'm just trying to work and get my job done so I can go home. I really don't even. And then you do that thing where you just like dread going to work. And then you dream about it, and you dream about the tension, and you dream about work, and then you wake up and you're like, oh. And then you get in your car and you're, oh, it's my day off. Oh, thank God. Have you ever been stuck in a car trip with two parents that couldn't stop fighting? That's tension. It's your two bosses, and they're having what's it called, a organizational dispute. That's tension. But tension is a part of life. It's not something you can run away from. And I want you to get this. The point isn't to try to avoid tension. In life, a lot of times, we think that tension bad, but tension isn't always bad. It's like this. In that story that I told you of Dr. Sam Chand, where he had the board members, and there was a tense situation with the two board members, and then the tense meeting where he made them work it out, and then the productivity that follows. Was that good or bad? Well, the tension surfaced a problem, they worked through it, and then it caused greater success in the future. Tension isn't always bad. There are some times when God even brings tension by to get us to change something. And so what we do is we either change or we double down and get more and more stiff and wedged in there like a sore thumb, and then God keeps putting on the pressure, and we keep trying to stick in there and not changing. It's not intentional, isn't always bad, and it's not our point and our purpose in life to try and avoid it. John 16:33, Jesus is talking about different problems in the world and whatnot, and I don't want to focus on the whole thing that he says. It's really good in there. If you want to just read John 16, it's quite a lengthy bit there. I don't even want to read the whole verse. It's just this idea right here, right in the middle that I want to get at. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. Just a very simple, not even a full sentence. I mean, the sentence goes on, but just a very simple thought that we try to avoid. In this world you will have trouble. You could even say it like this: in this world you will have tension. It's going to happen. You can't avoid it. If you're married, you're going to have tension. If you're dating, you're going to have tension. If you're single, you're going to have tension. If you have a job, if you don't have a job, whatever you do in life, you're going to have tension. It's a part of your life. You can't run from it. You can't try and fix it. Oh, if there just wouldn't be tension anymore. And I really want you to get this. The point is not that you try to avoid tension. Tension is tense, but that doesn't mean we have to get rid of it. But the thing is, we always get surprised when we have to deal with tense things, with tense situations. Financial troubles come along, and what do? Oh, it's going to happen. You have a family quarrel. Oh, it's going to happen. Life is full of tension. There are 3 basic ways to deal with tension, and not every situation warrants all 3 of these. Different situations you have to look at differently. The first way is to just simply ignore it. Not everything has to be attacked. Sometimes when we get in leadership, we feel like we have to micromanage every little single aspect, make sure everything goes off flawlessly perfect, right? A lot of things don't. A lot of things you just ignore. I'll give you a good example. Your kid is having a rough day and he's tired, and they do something out of character. They lie one time. They don't lie all the time. They're tired, they're having a rough day, they lie about something. You don't have to pounce on them and climb down their throat. Everybody makes mistakes. That would be a good example of cutting some slack. Now, let's say your kid is lying all the time. Okay, well, that's a different issue altogether. Not everything has to be addressed right now, taken care of right now. There's a lot of times as a leader when you have to just accept the fact that people aren't going to do it your way, and that's okay. So somebody does something that just this week, somebody said something, boy, did it get under my skin. I was about ready to lay on the 5 degrees, and then I was like, it's okay. And then I let it go. Why? Because the course of action in that tense situation was to ignore it. Let it go. It didn't have to be dealt with. The second way of these 3 ways to deal with tension is to address it. This would be, another way of saying this would be to resolve it. You are going to face it, to try and get closure on this, to finish it up. Let's say, for instance, you and your spouse are having a fight. It needs to be resolved, preferably that same day. It's okay to have conflict and disagreement. When conflict and disagreement boils over and becomes a constant thing, and you're refusing to admit it, you're refusing to admit that you're wrong, you're refusing to admit that you ever could be wrong, it's always your fault. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. You have to, as both of them, husband and wife, you have to be humble, you have to come together and try to both find a way to resolve the conflict. That's something that's needed. That would be a good example of tension that you should resolve, tension that you should face. So then the third way to deal with tension is to use it. There's going to be some tense situations in your life that you can't do anything about, and they're going to stay there. And you're going to try and fix them and resolve them to get it out of the way as fast as you can, and you can't. Anybody in leadership knows this. There's going to be some things that you just have to live with it every single day, and it just gets very tiresome. But it's just what you got to do in life. There are a lot of situations that you cannot resolve and you cannot ignore. They are simply there. So, what do you do in those kinds of situations? You find a way to use it. How do you use it? Well, first off, accept it. Sometimes we get so hung up on the fact of what should be that we don't think reasonably about what is. Well, they shouldn't be doing this, but they are. Well, that's not fair. Didn't say it was. They're still doing it. Don't live in denial of the situation. That doesn't help. Living in denial of the tension. Oh, no, everything's fine. I'm fine. No. Denying tension doesn't do anything. Accept it. Then, use it to grow and to change. Use it to get creative. And you might say, okay, how do you possibly use tension to grow and change and get creative? Okay, I'll tell you. I was teaching a class one time, and there was a person who just nitpicked everything. They were really a pain in the butt. I mean, everything they had a comment about, they criticized everything, they nitpicked everything. I mean, it got to be where I really had the option to rewrite the entire class, to be nothing but thinking how this person would respond negatively and coming up with the rebuttals before he ever made them. It could have come down to that. But instead, I realized that the things that he was nitpicking, he had some really good points. So you know what I did? I studied harder. Because I realized that there were things in that class that didn't make a whole lot of sense. See what I mean? But because I was so self-conscious about somebody opposing me, I almost missed out on a very important lesson that I could have learned, I could have grown. That's how you use tension. So I thought deeper about it, I prepared better, and I made the class better. And everybody profited. I profited because I learned how to take that tense situation and grow from it. He profited because he actually learned the course material instead of just blowing through a class. And everybody else in the class profited too because it wasn't a mediocre class anymore. That's how you use tension. Sometimes we just try to find a way out of the tense situation as soon as possible, when the truth is we just need to figure out how to leverage it, how to harness it, how to use it to motivate us. You don't have to run from tension. So life is definitely tense. It's definitely tense. I hope I didn't ruin anybody's day by pointing out that fact. I hope that you learned it before you graduated high school, but if you didn't, I guess now is as good a time as any. Life is tense. You have to learn to manage it. And one way of doing that is by learning to see opportunities instead of obstacles. Learn to see opportunities instead of obstacles. Maybe you're trying to do a job. Your boss is a pain in the butt, okay? What can you learn from that? I'm just going to quit. Yeah, you could quit just because it got hard, but what could you learn from it? Let's say you're doing a ministry. Maybe the ministry itself is difficult. Do you know ministry is difficult? It is. Let's say a person in the ministry is difficult. Well, how are you going to grow from it? How are you going to learn from it? The problem is that we condition ourselves from a very young age to not see opportunities, but to only nitpick all the problems. I can't because of this and this and this and this. This isn't fair because of this and this and this and this. They should do this because it's this and this. But what can you do to grow and change? Stop seeing obstacles and start seeing opportunities. Once you change this very simple aspect of how you deal with tension in your life, it will revolutionize everything that you do. And it doesn't just, and there it also goes into prayer. You know, our prayers are often centered on asking God for no tension. Next time you pray, stop and listen to your prayers. Notice how much of it is focused on your comfort level. God, change them. Do this. Why? So that I can live without tension. I am not enjoying dealing with this person. I'm not enjoying dealing with this situation. These are uncomfortable situations, Lord, and I want you to remove the tension from them. But see, that's not really the purpose of prayer, and it's not really the purpose of life. We aren't meant just for the sole purpose of getting away from tension as quickly as possible. Let's look at 1 Thessalonians 5:18. It says, give thanks in all circumstances. For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Well, I don't know what God's calling me to. You're going through a tense situation, yeah? Yeah. Why don't you learn to be thankful in that tense situation? But God needs to resolve that tense situation. Maybe, but it's not God's will for you to not have any tension. It's God's will for you to learn to be thankful in all circumstances, or you can even say in all tension. You can complain about it, or you can learn from it. But I can promise you this, you cannot do both. You cannot be in a tense situation and complain about it at the same time that you're learning about it, because if you complain about it, it changes the way you think. This is a medical fact, not a Michael idea. This is a medical fact. When you learn to complain, all you do is you teach your brain to look for certain things, certain bad things. So every time that you come to those situations that are hard, it'll just get harder and harder because you're teaching your brain to find the worst in every situation. But when you learn to be thankful, you are literally rewriting what you're telling your brain to look for. Now, the older you get, the harder it is to rewrite your brain. This is also a medical fact. Your brain becomes less spongy. It becomes more set. It becomes very difficult to change the older you get. Pretty much after you get into your 40s and your 50s, your brain really starts solidifying, and it's a lot harder to learn new skills. It's a lot harder to relearn how to deal with situations. What I'm saying is, don't wait. Don't wait. Learn to deal with your tension now. You can complain about it or you can learn from it about it, but you can't do both. You will find the worst or you will find a way to grow. Much of our disappointment in life, and this is something that really opened up my eyes, much of our disappointment in life comes from our impossible dream of a life without tension. We get so mad and upset because we see something that we want, this ultimate goal. this what's it called? Utopia. This utopian vision of perfection. And it doesn't have tension there. We don't know exactly how to get from point A to point B, but we know what it looks like over there. It's a place where nobody ever bothers me, where no situation is ever difficult, where when I do something good, people just fawn all over me. Oh, wow, look at you. You did the best job in the world, and people actually care about you. It's a great place. But then we get to the real life, and we just get really disappointed because we have that impossible dream, and we don't see it here. In the real world, life is full of tension, and that dream is doomed to failure. So instead of having more realistic goals, I want to learn how to deal with tension better. I don't want every single time that a new tension comes in my life for it to destroy me. I want to learn how to deal with it. A realistic goal. Instead of having realistic goals, we have impossible goals. Everybody will like me. I won't have conflict with anybody. If our primary purpose is to find serenity, we never will. If your purpose in life becomes to try and find happiness and peace, you'll never find it. I don't know how it works. You keep going after it and you never find it. But if we deal with tension, you will be calmer. If you learn how to deal with the tension in your life, you will be calmer. Separate it into those three groups. What do you need to ignore? What do you need to address? What do you need? See, sometimes we have problems in our lives that we never resolved it. So we just, well, it'll just go away, and then it didn't go away. Ever notice how you're pretty much the same person you were when you were a teenager? You're just in a bigger body. Have you ever noticed that? The same insecurities that you had in high school, they're still there. You didn't deal with them. They're still there. And so now you're an adult person. You're like, oh, I'm above it. And it's like, no. Now you're insecure and you care what people think. I'm just kidding. That's a song. Anyways. When you are exhausted, you become unable to deal with tension. Small things become huge things. You just get blown out of perspective. And the less you learn how to deal with them, the more little things just add up. It becomes thing after thing after thing, where now it's like, oh, all I have is tension, because we have this backlog of tension. Things that we haven't dealt with, we haven't addressed, we haven't used. So it's just kind of building up on it. So we keep having these new things adding to the list. And I do want to say that it is going to take time to heal. Anytime you're talking about anything, whether it's physical health, mental health, spiritual health, it takes time to heal. When you've been hurt, you have to take the time to get things back in order, right? You break a leg. What do? You go get a cast on, right? When you suffer a severe defeat, severe loss like death, take some time. Take some time. Sometimes we get our minds so set on doing the things that we forget to take a little bit of time and heal. Really, it's all right. Take a little bit of time and heal. And I think that we'd see a lot healthier Christian development if we would take our own health more seriously. If your body is tired, just real quick tips here. Sometimes people don't distinguish what kind of tired they are. Oh, I'm just so tired. Well, what kind of tired are you? If you are physically tired, if your body is tired, there's very simple things you can do. First off, eat. Sometimes we're tired because we're not eating well. Second off, rest. Take a nap. Go to sleep. You can't be running around 24/7. Or maybe you're sleeping too much, in which case you need to limit your sleep. And I hate to be the one to say this, but learn how to exercise and then learn how to enjoy exercise. Do you know a large majority of elderly people having falls and getting seriously injured is because of weakened leg muscles? Did you know that? Did you know that one of the single greatest things you can do as you age is to make sure that you're keeping your leg muscles up? One of the single most important things you can do. Well, that's not very spiritual. Okay, all right. I'm telling you, it'll help. And then I already said sleep. Another way that you can rest when your body needs it is, do you know it's okay to maybe take a little bit of time, maybe even have a day off of work? Did you know that? It's true. I told you guys, I used to work 6 days, 12 hours a week, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I was beating myself. And you know what the thing is? When it finally hit me, I was in the car when Gracie was there, and when it finally hit me that I was working harder than most anybody else, at different jobs and stuff around me and stuff, that not everybody did that. They went to work at 9. They got off at 5. And I said, well, I don't have to get up at the butt crack of dawn and start working and work until 8 or 9 at night? People don't do that? And she said, no, people don't do that. When it finally clicked in my head that I was working harder than most of society, I realized, for what? Anything that you can't do in 8 or 10 hours of work in a day, leave it for the next day. Prioritize your day, do what you got to do. But if you're working that many hours, you got to figure out what's important in life. You don't have to kill yourself and work. Now, see, the thing is, people go to the other extreme too. They say, "Oh, okay, well, I took a shower today. I'm feeling pretty victorious." Well, I mean, I guess that's a good starting point, but that's not really the ending point. But anyways, so figure out what kind of tired you are. If you're physically tired, do those physical things. If you are, if you're emotionally or mentally tired, learn how to balance your life. Balance between work and play. Don't work too much. Don't work too little. Don't play too much. Don't play too little. And don't isolate yourself. This is a big thing with introverts. Well, if I go out in groups, I get even more tired. Yes, I understand that. You can still have one-on-one time with people. You can still have one-on-one time with people. You don't have to do the extrovert thing and go to parties. If you're an introvert, you don't have to do the extrovert thing and go to a big group of people. But that doesn't mean you have to completely isolate yourself either. And if you're spiritually tired, so physical tired, mentally or emotionally tired, and the third one, if you're spiritually tired, create places and times for your devotionals. This is my time for devotion. This is where I go. So you go, it can be anywhere. Let's say it's in your car. You go to your car, and you just get alone, and you pray. No distractions, no telephones, no TV, nothing. Just you and God. You start getting in that. That's a healthy rut to get into. You can start getting into that rut, and you'll see your spiritual health start increasing. Have mentors and companions, people who come alongside you and help you towards the goal of Christ. Mentors who will come and teach you what you don't know. If you don't have people in your life like that, you're missing out a lot. So now going back to the idea of dealing with tension, let's look at a story that someone in the Bible dealt with a very tense situation. It's pretty much all of Acts 27, but I'm not going to read the whole chapter because that would be insanely long. So I'm just going to read little excerpts from it, and then I'll kind of highlight the things that you missed. It starts in verse 1. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion named Julius. So Paul gets arrested, and they're going to ship him off to Rome. Okay? All right? So that's where we're at here. And while they're getting the boat ready, Paul and some other prisoners get put under the centurion, who's kind of like a lieutenant or something. You roll with me on this, okay? And he's with the Roman soldiers, and he's the one who's on the ship who's going to be in charge of the prisoners. So, and they belong to the imperial regiment. Okay, so let's look at this. So now hop down to verse 9 through 11. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also." Now, typically when we read this story, we say, yeah, see that? Paul tried to tell those stubborn Romans, they just wouldn't listen. That's not the point I want you to get from this story. I want you to get this point, that Paul is in a very tense situation. He went to Jerusalem where he knew that he was going to get arrested, and he did. And so now he's getting shipped off to Rome after a couple years in prison. He's now being sent to Rome. This is a very tense situation. He looks outside and he sees, this is not good sailing weather. You guys might want to rethink this. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. So the captain is all like, "That's fine. It's fine. I got this." And they end up hitting a storm, We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. This is a very tense situation. Things are not going well. If you've ever been stuck on the ocean in a boat, it's very frightful. It's extremely scary. And when you don't get this on land. On land, it rains, and you're like, oh, haha, that's cute and funny. You know what I mean? On the water, you can't see the land. And then the waves are doing this. It gets very scary very fast. And there's not like a get-out-of-jail-free card. There's no quick exit. You can jump from the boat, but you'll die. So then the boat is taking on water, and this is not a good thing. This is not a fun situation. You get really wet. All your stuff gets wet. This is just not fun. So at this point, they're just in despair of the situation. And Paul ends up getting kind of a vision or a message from God, I don't remember which, saying, hey, it's going to be okay, but the ship's going to be lost. So there's that. So then that takes us to this. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move. And the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. And that's that's kind of the end of what I want to read. But that's a very tense ordeal that we just read about. It was over 14 days that this ordeal took. That's 2 weeks. I don't know if you've ever lived somewhere that even had a storm for longer than 2 days, but this is a storm that went over 2 weeks. This is not a fun situation. Paul lived in tension, but many were saved. When we fail to deal with tension, we get frustrated. We try to control everything. We try to work harder and be smarter than the tension. Or we try to escape from the tension through entertainment and pleasure, like overeating. And we make it worse. We make the situation worse because of how we're acting. We don't deal well with it. We end up not growing through it because, well, we're not allowing ourselves to be changed. We end up developing poor health habits. What do you see when you see people go through extremely tense situations for long periods of time? They get fat, right? They overeat. They don't exercise. They just sit on their couch and they freak out. Let's, for instance, look at what happened over the past year during COVID. A lot of very tense people who let their health go down the pot. That's what people do a lot of times. And so we don't grow. We make it worse. We have poor health habits that we get. We start hurting others. And that brings us to a very important lesson that I think Paul can teach us. The presence or absence of tension doesn't make it not God's will. The presence or the absence of tension does not make it not God's will. See, that's a very important point because we make our lives about living without tension. That's impossible, and it's not even the goal. But getting through tense times requires that you put your heart in order. Now, what do you mean? Well, ask yourself some very simple questions. And if one of these sticks out, I'm going to read a series of questions. If one of these sticks out, just write them down and think about it throughout the week. Question number 1, what is your motivation? Sometimes we have kind of motivation to succeed, to get noticed, to be important. Do you manage your time well? Sometimes we just kind of let our time go as if it was a limitless resource. Are you in a habit of changing, or are you the same person you've been for years? Do you challenge the way you think, or do you just try to be comfortable? Do you get on edge when people say a point of view that is not your point of view? If you were to read an atheist making fun of Christianity, would you just get mad and ignore it? Or would you use it as an opportunity to think and refine your beliefs? And I don't want an answer. I want you to think about it. If you're a Republican, let's just assume that you're a Republican for the sake of this argument, and a Democrat comes by and goes on a tangent against Republicans, would you use it as an opportunity to grow and learn? Or would you just get mad and defensive? Most people, when anybody says a point of view that is not your own, the instant reply is to get angry. That's typically how we work. You don't agree with me, you're an idiot. Is your spiritual life something you do or someone you are? Do you take time to rest? Take a break. Do you take time to reflect? What have I accomplished? Do you take time to refocus? Where am I headed? Do you constantly need distractions because you aren't happy? These are some good things to ask yourself. And if you get that in here resolved, dealing with the tension out here is a lot easier. Because sometimes we're at tension in here, and then we try and fix everything out here, but in here there's still a war, and that won't get you anywhere. But when you're dealing with tension, one thing to learn is that learn what to say yes to and what to say no to. Saying yes is not more spiritual. And one thing you have to learn about what you say yes to and what you say no to is that every yes is pregnant with a no. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you say yes to doing this, that by necessity, that's a no to that. I'll give you an example. Monday night, Gracie says, I want to go on a date. Monday night, my boss says, I want you to work. Monday night, my kid says, I want you to read me a story. Everything you say yes to is pregnant with a no. You say yes to this, it means you're saying no to that. You need to prioritize what you're saying yes to. Sometimes we're just afraid to say no to something. We don't want people to think we're lazy or something. And so sometimes what we do is we end up getting caught up in things that we don't really want to do. But if you look at the heroes of the faith, the big guys in the Bible, you see a life of tension. Abraham lived with tension, the tension of faith. He traveled all the way from one end of his world to the other end of his world. Moses lived with the tension of slaves who didn't want to be free. Joshua lived with the tension of dragging the Israelites forward. They didn't really want to go forward, but he still dragged them along. Jesus lived with the tension of betrayal and suffering that he was inevitably going to face. Life is full of tension. We all live in tension that may or may not be fair. The enemy is always looking for opportunities to destroy you. And I think one of our biggest problems is that when we go into a conflict, we don't realize that Satan is looking for a way to use it to destroy us. We go into it just kind of like, boo. We have a conflict with people. What do? We get defensive. We try to prove ourselves. We go and tell everybody else how they're wrong. They did what. Instead of that, we should be doing this. Whoa. What angle is Satan trying to play to cause a problem here? I'm out of nowhere having a problem with my boss. I like the guy. Gee, I wonder if maybe Satan's trying to work something in there. When conflict comes by, when tension comes by, I'm not saying tension is always of the devil. That's not what I'm talking about. But Satan is always looking for a way to use things to destroy you. When you're in a tense situation and your first reaction is to respond out of anger, to get bitter, to get hurt, to lash back out, stop and ask yourself, is this the right way to deal with tension? Is it a healthy way to deal with tension? And what angle is Satan trying to play to cause us to be a bigger problem? We shouldn't be just stumbling through our lives. Oh, well, isn't it just weird that we're facing all these problems? Did you know that Satan can use physical things to tear us down too? Did you know that? He doesn't just have to have spiritual things. It's not like, oh, I just feel real down in my spirit today. Well, Karen, have you had breakfast? Did you get up and exercise, or have you just been kind of moseying around your house in your house slippers? See what I mean? And then sometimes where it's thing after thing after thing happening, and it's just like, oh, we just can't seem to get a break. I wonder if Satan's maybe trying to distract you. But we just read what the will of God is for us to be thankful in all those circumstances. It's hard to be thankful when you're going up against somebody who's just a pain in the butt. God, I don't like this person. I don't want to deal with them. That's hard to be thankful for. The enemy is always looking for opportunities to destroy you. But, and this is kind of an interesting thing, every battle you face is an opportunity for victory. Everybody wants victory in their life, right? I want to conquer, I want to be, I want to see God do big things, but they don't want the conflict. How does a victory come if it's not through a battle? Doesn't that make sense? Do you ever see a general lead his army out into war in a field that there isn't anything there, and they say, well, we conquered? No, there was no fight. There can't be a victory without a battle of some kind. And General MacArthur didn't get praised for just saying, hey, I'm here. Every battle you face is an opportunity for victory. And with great victories, and great victories only come through battles. Stop seeing it as an intrusion. Stop seeing the tension and the conflict and the heartache that you're dealing in your life as an intrusion in your life. It is part of your life. The tension that you deal with is part of your life. It's not an intrusion. It is life. Why I don't like having to do... I didn't ask if you liked it. It's a part of your life. Whether you like it is up to you. But it's a part of your life. I'm fairly certain that Jesus didn't like the idea of having to suffer. I'm pretty sure that wasn't like something that he was thinking, it's going to be so fun when everybody abandons me and I'm dying on the cross. It's going to be dope, yo. I don't think he was like that at all. I kind of see him praying praying at night the night before, or I guess the night of, however you want to say that. And I kind of hear in his prayer a little bit of unhappiness there, a little bit of desperation in the situation. I don't think it was something he was overly excited about. In fact, the Bible says about how he was looking forward to what the outcome would be. So stop seeing your tension as an intrusion in your life and see it as an opportunity. When you are facing tension, your outlook changes everything. Do you start seeing immovable barriers, or do you start seeing opportunities and chances? And how you view the situation is infinitely more important than what the situation actually even is. Life is full of things you can't resolve. But some really good news is that resolving isn't necessarily the goal. So what are you going to do to grow and learn from the situation? Think about the stupid things your kids or your grandkids have done. Just think about it. You get older and you get upset because you wanted the best for your kids. You sacrificed. You tried to be what your parents weren't. And then you see your kids and your grandkids doing stupid things, and you have to deal with it. Oftentimes it's easier to just nitpick about it. They're just really making some stupid ideas. Think about when it comes time to make an important decision and your spouse makes a decision without you. Well, that was a really stupid thing to do. When you see your parents and they made a decision, that's not what I would have done. Why did you do that? Just the hopelessness of that situation, the helplessness. Life is full of things you can't resolve. So what are you going to do to grow and learn from it? I'm not the one who needs to grow. My kid's the idiot that needs to change. What are you going to do to learn and grow from it? Are you focused on your level of comfort or on growing regardless? Sometimes we just get upset because our kids are doing stupid things, or because our boss is doing something stupid, or because someone at the church is doing something stupid. When instead of those things, we don't need to be focused on our comfort in the situation. Life is not about our comfort level. There will always be things that make it hard for you to move forward in life. It could be your goodness blinds you, your inability to admit your faults, complaining and refusing to trust in God and consciously move forward, discontentment, your own hang-ups that stop you up, the tension of life. You have to choose whether you will quit and achieve nothing or try and achieve something. The only thing that ever comes from quitting is quitting. The only thing that ever comes from pressing on is victory, strength, more, having more, accomplishing. When you push forward, you conquer. You get things that you wouldn't have got. When you quit, all you'll ever get is quitting. That's all you'll ever get from quitting. So the tension in your life, it's there. You can not like it. You can pretend it doesn't exist, but it's there. So are you going to use it to move forward, or are you going to just quit and it'll still be there? If you can't overcome the hang-ups in your life, and this is something that is a personal drive to me. In this church, we always talk about how it's the mission of the church to bring people to God, to build bridges in the community. That's what this church is about. But the sad truth is, if we can't overcome the hang-ups that we deal with, we ourselves become a barrier to bringing people to God and building bridges in the community. Our inability to deal with the tension, to be content, to see our faults, to keep pressing forward, those things, if we don't push through the headwind, we become a barrier to the mission of the church. And everything that we fight for is for nothing, because we're fighting in vain, because we're fighting ourselves. There is some good news in all that, though. None are perfect. The big difference here in all these things is some try and some don't try. That's really the heart of it. Some try, some don't try. Lord, thank you for the tension that you've brought into our lives, because it's helped us to rely on you in a bigger way. It's helped us to grow. It's helped us to help others. It's helped us to move forward. I pray, Lord, that you would help us as we're going through these tense situations to find you in them. And as 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, that we would rejoice in all circumstances. Because it's not the person and it's not the situation that's making us unhappy. Lord, I pray that you would speak to our hearts and show us ways that we can deal well with the tension in our life. How can we deal with it, God? Give us open eyes and open ears, that we would listen to what you're trying to say, that we would act honorably in these situations in such a way that honors you. And we love you, Lord. Amen.